leave no one unhappy with me in this room, or everyone unhappy equally. In some jurisdictions, I represent law enforcement managers when they're in the process of being removed from office. I've represented city managers when they were being fired. I've also conducted audits of internal affairs investigation units all over the state. In one capacity or another, I have read between 3,000 and 4,000 IAs. I've worked with over 200 agencies around the state. I am also a form of civilian oversight part-time in the city of Santa Cruz and in the city of Davis. And each one of those forms of oversight is unique. Prior to being the independent police auditor in the city of Santa Cruz, I was the legal advisor to Santa Cruz previous Citizen Police Review Board. And I actually got to go into closed sessions with members of the board when they would review IA files, which is one of the reasons, and I'll lay the card out right now. And I've also been a member of the NACOL board. It's my view that auditor models tend to accomplish more for a variety of reasons. One of them is an auditor model tends to bring more expertise to bear. And I saw that firsthand. To back up a second, I've never been a peace officer. In fact, my first experiences with law enforcement were negative ones. I was a Vietnam War protester in New York City. In those days, they didn't arrest people. They knocked you to the ground and moved on. So I never thought I'd be doing what I do now, which is working solely with law enforcement. I spend on an average of 10 to 20 hours a month in ride-alongs every month with law enforcement. So part of what that means is a couple of things. The first one is it's my experience, and I will tell you what I tell chiefs. I teach classes to chiefs around the state. The first thing is the vast majority of officers are good people, but it goes beyond that. And I feel obliged to say this because, most people don't find a way to give back in their lives. And there's a way that being a peace officer is a way to give back. It's been my experience in general in most departments, as in most human organizations, that between 10 and 15% of the people are problematic. That doesn't mean that they're using excessive force. It can mean that they want to work graveyards and sleep. But 10 to 15% are problematic. So that's another piece of it. The next piece of it, and remember, I've read a lot of IAs. The vast majority of agencies don't want to have bad cops. Okay? They may not feel empowered to get rid of them, but they don't want to have them. And the vast majority of agencies, when I've shown them how to do better IAs or how to do more competent investigations, embraced it. Now this gets to the second problem of public civilian oversight. And it's a dilemma. I don't think there's a clean answer. And I'll put it in the most direct way possible. If you're a good friend of mine and we're at a party together and I can see from across the room that your fly is open, would you rather have me come and whisper in your ear that your fly is open, or would you rather that I shout it from across the room? If I shout it from across the room, there are all these secondary issues that occur. Now, I understand the issue of transparency, and I am a big believer in transparency in government. But the problem is, if you gratuitously embarrass people, you get less effective change. It's been my experience, and it was my experience with the Civilian Oversight Board in Santa Cruz, that it was ineffective. Number one, because these were people who had no expertise. Number two, because they drew more heat than light. And they had no credibility with the department. Because the other piece of it is, if you're going to make, the way I was thinking about putting this, the issue is not what's on the menu. The issue is, what can you get the waiter to bring you? Okay? if what you want to do is improve a police department, there's an argument to be made that the most effective way to do it is not to reinvestigate their cases, but to review them. And to have an auditor who issues reports that are public that constitute critiques, not of the personnel content, but of the report, the body of IA reports itself. I mean, that's what my experience has been. And I will tell you, it's my view that we've accomplished a lot more in Santa Cruz, and we are accomplishing a lot more in Davis doing it this way. Because I have credibility with the people I'm giving feedback to. They listen to me, and we make changes. The only other piece of this, for what it's worth, everything needs oversight. The reason why we have peace officers is we need oversight. I ride a motorcycle. I rode a motorcycle up here. In the absence of oversight, I would always speed. We all need oversight. Everyone needs oversight, and there needs to be a mechanism for accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Sheriff Phil.
Well, I too am happy to be here tonight, believe it or not. It's good to have a forum to hear other sides of the coin, so to speak. Sometimes we live in our organizations and listen to ourselves and start to think that we're the only authority, and it's always good every once in a while to have other people give you their point of view, which you may not have thought about. So I view tonight's meeting here as not only just informative for you, but informative for myself also. I find it difficult to disagree with Mr. Aronson on a lot of points. However, that said, I also agree with the Chief Nielsen's point, and that is that as an agency head, I think it is my responsibility, not just that I should oversee my staff and my agency, and that it's up to me to enforce discipline and the rules and regulations. That said, there's always room for improvement. Our practices and what we do, our policies and procedures, and I don't have a problem receiving input from different segments of our community that at least can give me a perspective that maybe I haven't seen. As far as in, police complaints, citizen complaints against police, and those go, it is, in my estimation, a fairly complex animal. There's a lot of laws on the books. There's a lot of matters that we have to deal with in doing our investigations, and frankly, the staff, when we do investigations, they have certain rights that are allotted to them, and we have to adhere to those rights, yet conduct hopefully a thorough investigation and come up with an appropriate finding in that investigation and deal with it just as appropriately. In most of the things that we look at, I generally tend to find that they are more or less not the big ones. It's not saying that it doesn't ever happen, but they're not the excessive use of force and those types of things. Usually what we get is whether or not a person says they felt they were treated fairly and courteously. There's something about the way they were treated and what the officer did that didn't set with them well. So there's a lot of that. And what we try to do in those cases is to kind of get to the bottom of it and maybe determine that we need to do some more training with our staff in certain instances that does occur. It's just, the whole idea of oversight, and it's not that we wouldn't want oversight, because I certainly don't like going to meetings and receiving the wrath of the public over things that we've done if we can avoid that, but sometimes you just can't. But I take also a point that was made earlier, listening to Christina's recap of what happened years ago, and she brought up some points that at that time were probably valid. One of the things is, as a law enforcement head, that I require in our agency is that all complaints that we receive They can't be just looked at face value. All complaints have to be important. All complaints that come into our office are required to come to my desk.